Chapter 7 of The Tower of Dago by more Jokai. This Librivox recording is in the public domain. Recording by Carolyn. Chapter 7 The Meeting. This terrible life had now gone on for 12 long years. Most of the actors in the drama had become grey. Several had died, and the total number in the tower had now fallen to 40. Even the master spirit of Dago had snow-white hair and seemed some 20 years older than he really was. During that time some 600 vessels had been shattered on the rocks of Dago. Some 18,000 men had perished, and a fortune of 100 millions of thalers had been destroyed. But still the demon of revenge and destruction was unsatisfied. 12 years of blood had not sufficed to quench the fire of hate that consumed his heart. All those whose bodies lay scattered among the rocks beneath him were men quite unknown to him. He never even learned their names, nor was he present when they were struck down. But one thing he still yearned for. Of one thing he was ever dreaming. His sole remaining wish was to hold in his destroying power those who had made him so miserable, to meet them for a moment face to face, then to drink in the curses of their despair as they were thrust down into their graves. That, indeed, would be the very crown of his life work. During summer the work was discontinued. In northern regions lighthouses are of little service in the short and light summer nights. During these months of inactivity the master, as became a dutiful father, instructed his son in all those arts whereby the mighty powers of nature are made serviceable to man. He exercised him also in the use of arms, not in true knightly fashion, but with all the tricks approved of bandits and corsairs. He took the boy with him in his boat among the reefs along the shore, so that he should learn early to be reckless and defiant of all danger. Many a time he would throw the lad from the boat right out into the eddy. At first he was unable to get out without help, and then the father would leap in after him and bring him back by the hair of the head. In a little time, however, the lad was expert enough to dispense with all help, and would swim in and out of the most dangerous positions alone. About the end of autumn in the 12th year, an Imperial Russian gunboat was wrecked upon the rocks of Dago. Among the papers found in the cabin by the plunderers was an Admiralty order addressed to all the commanders of war vessels. This document stated that during the past 12 years a vast number of marine disasters had occurred in the Baltic, and particularly, so at least it was believed, in the passage between Faro and Gustavsvarn. As not a single soul was known to have survived, the general voice of terror and exasperation had at length decided the ruling powers to move in the matter. The order went on to express the opinion that these seas must be the haunt of some piratical vessel which captured ships in stormy nights and sent them to the bottom after slaughtering their crews. For, strangely enough, no one had ever found a single fragment of any of the missing vessels. Seamen, it was stated, were in the habit, when a disaster was imminent, of committing a short account of the catastrophe to the waves in a sealed bottle, which, in all likelihood, would one day be picked up by fishermen. But out of some 600 missing vessels no such memorial had ever made its appearance. Human hands, it was therefore concluded, must be at work, and search for them must be diligently made. The document, therefore, required the commander of every man of war and gunboat to take every possible step to track out the mysterious destroyer. How the apostle of Dago laughed sardonically as he heard the order. "So they are coming at last," he cried, "those for whom I have waited so long. Right well shall they be received." At that season of the year dense fogs begin to be prevalent in the Baltic. These are of the utmost danger to seamen, for the rays of the lighthouses cannot penetrate the atmosphere, and the attention of vessels can only be attracted by the sound of bells. On one such hazy and sultry night the master of the Tower of Dago rang the bell for evening service. That night, surely, they should hold high festival. Vessels of war were certainly scouring the seas all around. One such vessel was still waiting on the rocks of Dago. Smaller ships, such as gunboats, brigs, and corvettes, were lying there in plenty, forming excellent places of retreat for the Hydra and Nautilus. To them the company of a full three-decker could not but be welcome. Presently, in response to the sounds which had so often proved a mariner's death knell, an answering signal was borne in from the open sea. It was the familiar, long-drawn tones of a great sea-horn, which can be heard many miles off in foggy weather. They were coming, then, at last. Only a little while ago, no doubt, they had thought that they had lost their way, but now, thank God, they were sailing towards a safe harbour. By daybreak they should be beyond all danger. "Not God in heaven can save them now," muttered the master, as with such thoughts he gazed intently into the gloom. But nevertheless it appeared that he could save them. Just as the approaching sound of the fog signal indicated that the vessel could now be scarcely a mile distant from the tower, the fog suddenly lifted, and the rays of the rising sun disclosed the outline of a ship of the line. She immediately dropped her anchor. For now that the fog had cleared, the seamen perceived the danger of their position and arrested their vessel's course. And that not a moment too soon. She lay to about a gunshot from the tower, and presently hoisted the Russian colours. In response, the master of the tower at once saluted her by running up the corresponding flag. The vessel's longboat was now lowered. The Commodore, a midshipman, and 24 marines and seamen took their places. All were fully armed. They steered for the entrance facing the sea. Although well concealed, they had soon discovered it with the aid of their powerful glasses. They succeeded in making their way safely through all the rocks and breakers which threatened their approach. The strangers were received at the lower door by an old, hunchbacked porter who was, to all appearance, nearly stone deaf. The Commodore had to shout with all his might into the fellow's ears before he could be made to hear anything. Then he gave an answer to which not a word could be understood, for the old man spoke the purest Plattdeutsch. By means of signs, however, he at length gave them to understand that he was the only servant in the establishment, and that if the gentlemen would like to speak to anyone they might go upstairs and see Mynheer. The Commodore ordered his men to land, and the entire company then followed the old porter. At each door which they passed on their way, the officer took the precaution of stationing 2 armed men. When they reached the observatory floor, only the coxswain and the midshipman, the latter quite a lad, remained with him. But these were evidently more than sufficient, for the master of the tower was quite alone in his study, and had beside him no other weapons than those of science. The Commodore saluted him in good French. "You are the master of this tower, I believe?" "At present, indeed, I am." "And for what purpose did you have it built, pray?" The master glanced sharply at his questioner. "May I first inquire," said he, "what entitles you to ask such a question?" "You shall hear," replied the officer. "You see, of course, by my uniform, that I am Commodore on a ship of the line in the service of His Majesty, the Tsar of all the Russians. The three-decker lying out there is my vessel, the St. Thomas. Of late years an enormous number of ships have been lost in the Baltic, and that in the most mysterious circumstances. I have therefore received orders to stop and search every suspicious vessel on the high seas, as well as to make any investigations upon the coast which I may consider advisable. My name is Count Zeno von Ungarn." Surely the master's features must long ago have assumed the repose of death itself, not to have been convulsed with every evil passion at the very mention of that name, the worst passion of all being joy. It was his brother who stood before him. The two sons had never seen each other since their earliest childhood. Zeno had visited his elder brother's house only in Fyodor's absence at sea, while Fyodor had never once appeared in the brilliant salons of the court. The elder brother, moreover, now looked much older than he really was. It was impossible, therefore, for Zeno to recognize him. Fyodor acknowledged his visitor's mission with a polite bow. "I am delighted," he said, "to have this pleasure. My name is Baron Helmfort." "Ah, a Swede?" "My ancestors may have been so. I am from Friesland." "And for what purpose do you live here?" "I live here," answered the master calmly, "mainly for scientific pursuits. There is, indeed," he added hesitatingly, "another reason as well, but one which, after all, I have really little reason to conceal from you." "Why, then, do you not inform me of it at once?" "Because a child might also hear it." The master here glanced significantly at the young midshipman, who was also in the room. "Oh, that is my son Paul," said the Commodore, with fatherly pride. "He is anything but a child. He is a midshipman on His Majesty's ship the St. Thomas, and has already been through many a deadly fray." "I do not doubt it, and yet he can hardly be more than 13 years old?" "That is, in fact, exactly his age." "I also have a son," said the master. "He is 16 years of age, and he too has seen and heard many fearful things. But one thing, you know, he must not hear: tales in which a woman—" "Ah, you are right," said the Commodore hastily. "If it is a question of that sort, I need ask no more." "Now, Commodore, if you wish it, I will myself show you all the rooms and passages in the building. Be good enough to accompany me." Fyodor led the way down the stone steps connecting one floor with another. The smallness of the rooms into which each story was divided easily made the stranger imagine that he was seeing the whole of the space between the walls, whereas he really saw only about 2/3 of it. A vertical partition, running from the vaults beneath up to the upper story, shut off a portion of the space. It was here that all the plundered treasure, ammunition, and guns were carefully concealed. Through this section a secret passage led down to the rooms in which the provisions were stored, and to the subterranean chapel in which the armed men were hidden, waiting for the signal to force their way by means of a trap-door into the upper portions of the tower. The living rooms through which the Commodore was conducted had quite the appearance of such as might be used by some contemplative and learned recluse. They contained naturalists' collections, shellfish and corals, antiques, and bookcases filled with yellow-edged folios. Presently the officer glanced out of a window in one of the rooms and saw away beneath him the flower garden with the asters and chrysanthemums blooming in the autumn sun. "Ah!" he exclaimed, "that garden tells plainly enough that this tower also has a mistress." "I am very sorry that I cannot conduct you thither, Count von Ungarn," said the master. "We should have to pass through the lady's boudoir." "The lady is your wife, is she not?" inquired the Commodore. "It is ill answering that question. Yes, and yet no." "Ah, a secret, I perceive." "Yes, Count. But to show you that the secret is in no way a suspicious one, I will make a suggestion. Where a man may not enter, a guest who is still a child may fitly enough be seen." So saying, he opened a door and called, "Alexander." In response, a tall, sunburnt lad stepped from the adjacent room. His face betrayed much perplexity upon perceiving the strangers. Feodor gently pushed him towards the younger youth. "See," he said, "this is Count Paul von Ungarn, a midshipman. Take him with you to see your mother, and be sure that you make good friends with each other." Alexander gazed in wonder with his great dark eyes, first at his father and then at the strange lad. He then silently held out his hand to Paul, drew him towards him, and embraced him. Finally he linked his arm in Paul's and led him away to see his mother. The frank wonder expressed by the boy's flushed face quite disarmed the Commodore's suspicions. He began to believe that, after all, those walls might merely conceal the secret of some tragedy of passion. One might well have grounds, he imagined, for shutting oneself off from the world, along with a woman whose face no one might look upon except a child no older than the tower itself. And yet, had he but known it, the woman might have been safely seen by anyone on earth except Zeno von Ungarn alone. Had he seen her, he must at once have recognized the nurse of his brother's child, the girl he had so often seen when visiting Feodor's castle. The features of women, too, do not alter like those of men. Had Zeno seen her, therefore, he must at once have guessed who the master of the tower really was. The party had just stopped at the entrance to the dining room. The little table was laid and luncheon was ready. A small cask of fresh beer stood tapped on the floor. Everything seemed most inviting. "We might, perhaps, remain here," suggested the master. "Your coxswain can examine the other rooms and the stores. There is nothing very remarkable about them. My old porter will open all the lock-fast places for him. He can then report the result of his inspection on his return." He laughed lightly as he concluded, and the Commodore laughed also. Their laughter seemed to be echoed by the voices of the two boys, which sounded from the garden below. As Count Zeno again looked down through the window, he saw that the lads were playing together. They were having a trial of strength. The clear voice of a woman, which seemed to sound through an open door, admonished them to be careful not to injure each other. But she apparently did not dream of admonishing them for trampling down all her flowers in their struggles. As he looked on at the havoc caused by the lads, Count Zeno could not but feel that the inhabitants of the tower appeared to be quite the most hospitable and complacent people he had ever met. End of chapter 7.